So, Ted, first of all, maybe it would be really useful for listeners who either don't know what sociocracy is or they're not super clear. Maybe you could say just a few sentences about what sociocracy is.
Yes. So overall, it's a governance system. So it's a combination of tools and processes that make it easier and more inclusive to run an organization. And we really want to run an organization as equals. So that's the assumption. Authority is distributed in teams that we call circles. So it's not a centralized form of power, but distributed. And another thing that comes with sociocracy is the decision-making method, which is consent. And that means that a decision is made when nobody has an objection. So just by changing that question a little bit from consensus, with often we ask, is this what you want? We ask, is there any reason not to do this? And this creates a slight bias towards a yes, so that groups are more likely to experiment. It also has sociocracy also has feedback loops baked into the system on all levels to create a learning organization. And one little thing, it's sort of the trademark feature is that we use rounds whenever we talk. So to make sure that we're all on the same page and that everybody is heard, even on that micro level of how we have conversations.
Thank you. I also, often people, when they read a little bit about sociocracy, are surprised to learn that it dates quite far back, like it has quite a long history. Where does sociocracy come from?
Yes, so the term has been around for a long time. Then it was picked up by somebody who started a Quaker school. They had some of the elements already, but one of the students there, Jared Endenberg, then grew up and inherited a electronic parts company. And he used some of the pieces that he learned as a child and added the cybernetics feedback loops and a few other things. And he really put it together in the 80s. So even though the term is older and some elements are, of course, older, and in the general culture, many like rounds, it's not a thing that is owned by sociocracy. So it's, but really the way it's being used now is the way it was assembled by Jared Endenberg and used since the 80s, which for self-management is fairly old.
And what about Sociocracy For All then, this organization that you're part of? What is Sociocracy For All and how did you join it?
So I joined it by co-founding it. That's one. The idea behind Sociocracy For All was that we were a little tired of the approach that had been used, and that is to share sociocracy as a consultancy, because we saw it as something bigger than that. We saw it as social change work. And so we didn't want only corporations or larger organizations that had the budget to be able to access it, but really everybody. That doesn't mean only the affordable side of things, but really everybody. Another thing that fed into it was that we wanted sociocracy and all the tools that come with it to be a common good. So we think it can't really be owned because it's something that's like a commons. So the first phase of Sociocracy For All, we worked on getting resources out so people can have a choice about how they govern themselves. Because many people don't even know that there's options. They just do what they learned growing up, and they don't even know there's different ways of doing it. And that cycle of people just doing what they learned themselves, we wanted to break by giving people resources, access to resources, so they could be more in choice. So we co-founded it, I think 2.5 years ago. So in 2016, Jerry Koch Gonzalez and I, and then very quickly turned it into a membership organization with now 60 something or almost 70, changes all the time, 70 members right now.
And what was it about sociocracy that appealed to you personally? Like, how did you come across it and what was the attraction?
So I always joke that I'm a native speaker of sociocracy because I didn't learn it through a workshop. I learned it by being part of an organization and just experiencing it. Like a child learns through immersion. I learned through immersion at first. I think the first official workshop that I was a part of was one where I co-taught already. So what was I had one light bulb moment that I go back to around sociocracy, and that was attending meetings. And we all, have sort of a cultural understanding of what meetings are like. They're typically long, they're typically annoying, they're typically, long-winded. So that's what I assumed it would be. And I remember doing a checkout, and the way I remember it is what was one of those moments where you say something, and in that moment you realize it's true. And what I said was, okay, I'm leaving this meeting more connected to you guys and more refreshed than I came. And I thought, that's not what you would expect from a meeting. That's really good. So I started paying attention to how things were done. And it was fairly new in that organization. That organization had just transitioned from consensus to consent and sociocracy itself. So people were still sort of trying it out. And so then I started reading the book, We the People. That was really the only book at that point. And then I got involved with the people here who were carrying it.
So you described that, like, one of the surprising factors of leaving a meeting and not feeling like your soul had died or something, as so many of us have experienced. What would you say are the other? What are the advantages of sociocracy? If I'm working in an organization, what would it make possible for me?
So it gives us a chance, like on a higher level, it gives us a chance to work together in integrity. And it's funny because sometimes it's hard to say it in positive terms. It's easier to say negative terms, and we're also struggling to say it in positive terms. So integrity is one of the terms that work for me. It is not being interrupted, not feeling slightly out of your center, because we have a visceral sense of when we're in integrity. So it is a way of moving forward as a group without having to dismiss anything. So you can actually hear each other and really work together and be equals in every moment. In general, what it is for sociocracy as a governance method is that it's open access. It's tried and tested, as I said. It's fairly old, so it has matured quite a bit. It's very flexible. We have sort of a shortcut is if it's dogmatic, it's not sociocracy, because it's all about balance. We're all balancing all the time. For example, we're balancing group versus individual. We're balancing forward motion versus consideration and going slow. We're balancing giving authority to groups while wanting to stay in the loop. So it's all about balance. So dogmatic things are not balanced. So that for me is the key thing. It's the balance, flow, integrity. Those are the positive terms that I would put on it. So it is the advantage of sociocracy really is that it's a good starting point, because it's specific. There's something concrete you can do, like rounds, like, sociocratic elections, like consent process. It's all, if you want it out of the box, you can take it out of the box, but it's also very tailorable from there.
Yeah, I really like that, because I think a lot of people nowadays confuse sociocracy with holacracy, which is kind of like sociocracy's better marketed, slicker cousin or something. I think a lot of people are turned off by holacracy because it is quite dogmatic, in my experience. Like Brian Robertson says, if you just take bits and pieces of holacracy, then it's not holacracy, and you have to sort of sign the Constitution in its entirety. Whereas my experience of sociocracy is, as you say, a lot less dogmatic and a lot more balanced and flexible, that it's sort of operating model agnostic almost. Would you agree?
Yes, though it's there's always a both and answer in here. When I teach workshops, I often make this like running joke of having 3 pre-made answers, and I'll say typically 90% of my answers are going to be one of the 3. One is depends, the other one is both, and the third one is give feedback. So and all of that applies here. So really, I also understand Brian Roberts in that he says, if you don't take all, it's not going to work, because there's some truth to that too. Because, for example, if you only use consent, but you do it in a group of 50 because you don't dare giving groups authority and really splitting up into smaller groups and distributing power, then consent doesn't work as effectively. So there is, it's both true at the same time that I want people to experiment and have their own experience and tailor it to whatever they need. And it's just as true to say, really, I really encourage you to do all, because I really see how all the pieces fit together in a way that they mutually reinforce each other. So both. And I guess the only thing I can do, since it's not my business to tell people what to do, is to say that, it's like, well, both. How about you start with something and try to stay as true as possible to how it comes out of the box. And yet, of course, you're allowed to think for yourself. Nobody's gonna punish you if you do anything like something else. It's so anyway, but I guess where I'm going with this is that I'm trying to see the need under protecting something like holacracy. I completely understand, I think, or in my projection, I have a sense of, yes, it makes sense to specify the system more and to protect it as something that is consistent and coherent, while sociocracy is more open, and that makes it also harder for people to dive into it. So whatever people need, I guess. Another thing is that but that's my bias. I would say holacracy is sociocracy, just in a highly specified way. So for me, this is part of the sociocracies. It's just a special version of it.
Yeah, I think the value from what I've heard with conversations with different people is that it's kind of scary to go from a traditional hierarchical top-down structure and step into nothing. So there's something about sociocracy or holacracy or any of these systems that are to some extent pre-designed that helps kind of hold people a little bit. So there's something that you're stepping into. And then I like what you're saying about, experiment with it, try it out in full to really get a true sense of it, I guess, and then see what makes sense to adapt or evolve based on your particular needs or circumstances.
Right, and the ultimate measure is, does it work for you? Is it effective? Does it give you what you want? If for any reason, would be hard for me to believe, but if for any reason rounds don't work for your group and they really don't give you that sense of, being on the same page and inclusiveness, that's not easy to say, but then don't do it. Or if it works for you to do part in rounds and part in what people call free flow, that's fine. What the measure is, does it give you what you want? But one piece about that is that we need to be honest with ourselves, because sometimes we sort of we do things and we're not really honest with ourselves. For example, if people do, reinvent structures and just go into that nothing and try to invent it themselves, then they might actually compromise on the effectiveness, or they might do things that it might have served them better to use something for start that is predefined. So I'm always I'm torn about this. I guess I'm just being transparent about sort of being pulled into two directions, and I guess the sweet spot is somewhere in a dynamic middle. Sometimes erring more on this side and sometimes erring more on that side, and being honest with yourself about how it plays out.
Yeah, one of the things a question I'm holding is that on the one hand, I can see that something like sociocracy might help shift a culture and our way of being together, our mindset even about each other and how we work and how authority works, by working at a level of habits and rituals. And on the other hand, I'm wondering if it's still possible to import old ways of being. Could you end up with someone who is still sort of tyrannical or dominant even in a circle situation? Or does sociocracy have any allowances for that, or does it address that in any way? Or does that need to be something else then that you kind of complement sociocracy with?
That's such a big and rich question, I guess. There's so first of all, we always combine. We want sociocracy for us is just one of the puzzle pieces. There's so many puzzle pieces that are similar in different domains. For example, nonviolent communication, the whole imago work, permaculture, social permaculture. There's very many pieces, and they all add something to the whole thing. Because ultimately, what we're after is culture change in how we relate to each other and to the world around us. If we operate from a position of thinking that we hold absolute truth, yes, then we can use sociocracy against each other, and that happens. That's not unheard of, and it's the saddest thing for me to witness, really, because it's hard for me to believe that is compatible with sociocracy, how I hold it, and yet, yeah, I see it happen. I guess that goes back to the dogmatism, right? But it needs the inner work to notice when you're in a dogmatic place and then to back off. Somebody recently taught me, I don't know where you had it from, to be honest. I wish I could quote it correctly, but I love the idea of, before you say something, ask yourself, are you willing to be wrong? That is for me in the spirit of sociocracy. For example, if I do a round and we co-create a proposal, then I don't have to be the one who knows, because it'll come out as a collective thing. And that is a relief at the same time as it is also very humbling. So there's both and here too. And that is that I see people not step into their power completely. So there's the two frames that I hold in that is power over, power under. People who come from a power over place, what they need is feedback on what that does, and people who object. But if you have a power over kind of person, a behavior, paired with people who are in power under behavior, then they both carry the same responsibility, and that is 100%. Because the people who could object, because they have the power, nominally they have the power in sociocracy to object, and they choose not to object and say, well, so-and-so was doing his power over thing again. Like, no, you could have objected. You were choosing not to take the power that you have. So there's both, some people have to step up and some people have to learn to share. But it's actually hard for both sides. And the holding responsibility 100% for whatever happens, that is a huge step. And that's where we all need work, because I'm assuming, I think I'm pretty certain about it, that most of us did not grow up and get socialized in that way. One short line way of saying that I've heard somebody say that we trained, her summary was, oh, that basically means sociocracy means no more excuses. I'm like, yes, that means it. No more excuses. If somebody does a power over thing, that's not an excuse. You can object. You can do something. You can give feedback. If you choose not to step in your power, or, if people complain, well, they don't really want the responsibility and so on, that's how the other side complains about the people who are in power over in victim patterns. They also have to address that. So, to me, the comparison that comes up for me is the following. Somebody called our book 300 pages of common sense. And he said, well, unfortunately, it's common sense that we seem to have to be told in order to take it again, And I found that interesting, because it's true, it is common sense. And it's a little bit like, how are you a good friend? How can you be a good friend? It's something that we're supposed to know. Okay, and if you wrote a 300-page manual about how to be a good friend, you would have to go into quite some level of detail, and yet it would all be common sense. But just imagine someone does not know how to be a good friend. They could take that manual and still get it wrong, even if they just went through the motions. So there is a limit to what one can do. One can offer the processes and offer the tools and offer how it could sound. And yet there's a limit, because people still have to shift into that mindset.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I think it was Margaret Wheatley who said something like, we haven't learned how to be in relationship with each other in this new way. which seems kind of crazy. And people often say to me like, oh, well, we know how to be autonomous and self-managing in our own lives. Why do we need to learn how to do it in organizations? But it's funny that in that different context, it is just, it's so unfamiliar to us. And I think highlighting on what you're saying as well, actually, we also haven't really learned how to be this way, you know, as parents, many of us, or as friends, as you say, as partners, that often we have those power over power under things going on there too. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, for me, the biggest learning that prepared me for sociocracy was being in a relationship with somebody who's an NVC, nonviolent communication trainer. So the no more excuses kind of slogan applied there, and I learned it. You know, it was painful to learn, but whenever I was doing a power under thing or like, you know, rebellion, whatever it is, I was called on it. So that makes you learn that, you know. It was so painful and very tearful actually, because I like it was taking my breath away of like I'm running like I can't do this, you know. There's like, oh, that's an excuse again. Of course I can do it, you know. So there were many iterations of me just going like, I can't. And it's okay, I'll try again. And of course we still slip, you know, but that's what prepared me, because that's exactly what we need in the relating to each other in organizations, in systems like sociocracy. It is coming, you know, shaking off the dust and trying it again of like, okay, how do we relate to each other as equals? Because if you think of it as a balance between power over power under, to use that as shortcuts, then being in balance is a very, very small kind, like it's a very, it's a narrow place to be in, and typically it will even be a dynamic place of, you know, shifting a little to this, shifting a little to the other side. So it's not something we inhabit very easily. We will, you know, we have to watch out. So it's a little bit like this is a good image that works for me. I don't know if they have that in Europe, but here in the US we have like a rough part in the asphalt on the road that wakes you up when you get to that side of the road, you know, a little bit like that. So, oh, now I'm leaning too far on the power underside, you know, wake up call. Let me go back to now I've been too assertive here, you know, let me do a round and hear what the others are thinking. So constantly steering and trying to stay in that sweet spot where it feels fairly balanced. That's the game.
Yeah, I was reading Stowe Boyd's newsletter this week, and he was quoting this article that was saying about leaders saying that change is hard, and, you know, this myth that 70% of change initiatives fail, that's actually apparently never been proven, which I didn't know until I read that. And this article was saying, yeah, change is hard, but let's not let that discourage us from doing it. It's worth doing, right? And most things worth doing are hard. Most learning worth doing is painful.
Yes, especially because what's the alternative? Staying. I mean, well, the way I look at it is, we spend so much time in places where governance is needed. You know, that starts with family, like parenting, family systems in general, organizations, workplaces, associations, neighborhoods. Like, we spend so much time, and if that time is spent in a disconnected place and not in integrity, it's not as enjoyable. So there's the advantage, like, there's so much advantage to trying it that to me there's really no other option.
I wanted to talk about some of the sort of shadow sides of sociocracy. I mean, with every system or approach, there's always, you know, shadow sides or blind spots to be mindful of. And one of them that came to mind was someone was telling me the other week that they've noticed that in their team, they've realized that people who have the skill to put forward really well-crafted proposals, or just are people who have a tendency to put proposals forward first or more regularly, tend to have more influence and power. And she wondered if there was like a bias there, like if there's some kind of status or power accumulation, if you're particularly good at putting together proposals or sharing them with the group in a sort of compelling, convincing way. What are your thoughts on some of the shadow sides of sociocracy, and how can we kind of watch out for them?
So one aspect of that is, yes, I agree. If it also has a slight bias to people who are quick on their feet when it comes to, because if you, for example, speaking around when it's your turn, it's, it's good if you have something to say. Some people like to sit with something longer than just say a 1 hour meeting.
Mm.
So that's something I see. There's certainly, and we're very, very aware of that, there is a class bias just in how confidently you're able to express yourself.
Mm.
So yes, all of those biases. And then on the other hand, that's the work we all have to do. So if we have a meeting evaluation and we see that that is a pattern we have, so-and-so brought a proposal again, and we can say it, I love that you bring those proposals. You really seem to have a genuine interest in moving things forward. And I love how you can express yourself so elaborately. I was also, observing that 2 or 3 people here, would don't seem to have that capacity, and I wonder how we can make that happen to hear more from them. That would be a way of not going into the blamey kind of, oh, this is bias and there's nothing we can do about it. No, the question is, so now how do we work with it?
Mm.
And how can we, for example, form a helping circle with somebody who tends to not put so many proposals out, and somebody, have them team up and work something out together. I mean, it's that's the no more excuses. Yes, there is a slight bias to that, and how can we work with it? Because obviously that bias is just as present in other forms of governance. In democracy, it's not only how elaborately you can express yourself, but also, how well you can. This the other side that gets rewarded. So, this is not unique to systems like Sociocracy, and I'm inviting groups to work with it instead of complaining about it. There is, hold on, I had one other thing, one shadow side that I see, and that sort of goes back to what we said about the shift in mindset, is that I am very concerned when people try to do it without training. Sort of the like, oh yeah, I think I get it, and then go do it. Because there is a lot to be said about details. Details matter a lot. And it's very easy to then sort of run a superficial form of it. And that concerns me, because then I'm worried about the pieces not fitting together well. Then I'm worried about the mindset that's underneath it. Then I worry about details that can, especially if they align with society, like biases in society, then we can run into trouble. For example, if you implement in a top-down way, and you have very mixed people from mixed class backgrounds, and the say a middle class person implements top down and does not offer enough training for the others, I'm worried about them being able to be in the system in a way that they can be heard, because they might not fully understand it, and need to be given, need to have access to training to fully express themselves in that new system. So superficial implementations in general concern me. And that's one downside of being so open and flexible. We're not protecting it. So we're just sort of crossing our fingers that people use it in a way that it was intended. But we have no control over it. So that's concerning to me.
It's interesting what you say about implementing it top down, because to me it's a sort of strange paradox if an organization is, for example, interested in being self-managing, to introduce that shift in a top-down way. How would you what sort of advice or tips would you give to people in organizations if they're interested in introducing sociocracy? What is a kind of good way to do that, would you say?
If you really look at it, the paradox, that's exactly what I call it too. It is a paradox. It's if you think about it just in logical terms, it's probably impossible to ever implement sociocracy, because who would decide that, right? And that's hard. So how we go about it and what we recommend to groups is that typically, there's one or two people within an organization that catch the bug and they really want to do something like that. And for them to just make that circle a little wider till they have a solid group. And the other piece of advice that I give is that they stay in conversation with everybody else and treat all the concerns that they hear from other people like objections. So they would already operate and practice in a system that they want. You can't, for example, vote, or autocratically implement sociocracy and kick everybody out who doesn't want it, or outnumber the people who don't want it. Then you would start the whole thing on the wrong foot. So the way we've seen it work well is with that, what we call implementation circle, implementation team. I know this is also something Frederic Laloux proposes, have your team of allies in your organization. And that's also where our role comes in. We're often the coach for that group. And that's our most favorite way of working. I don't like being in the role of a consultant. I much rather be in the role of a coach for the people who are doing it themselves in their own organization. That's the most comfortable place for me. And that's also how it can work, because when we say, it can't be implemented top down, that's true, yet it can also not be implemented bottom up. It has to be both. So there has to be both and it has to somehow work its way through all the levels.
And you've just published the kind of Sociocracy handbook, Many Voices, One Song, which I love and is super helpful, I think. I've heard a lot of people say, oh, this is exactly what I needed. Now it's kind of making sense to me. What is the vision for Sociocracy for All now? What are you looking to in the future?
So Sociocracy for All really has those three aims. One is what I said, what we started out with, is the access to resources. The book, of course, is part of that effort. The second is more community organizing for people who want more companionship. They are in sociocratic organization or want to be, or consultants, coaches, and so on. Also exchange within sectors. For example, we have one group that focuses on sociocracy in co-ops or in permaculture and so on. And the third aim is training and supportive training. So in our assessment right now, giving people access to resources, that first aim, is what we pretty much covered by the book. That the book is a download of what we know. There is still some curating to do, but that's really that covers a lot of it. So the two things that we're focusing on more right now is the aim number 2 and 3, the community organizing of people. So we do a lot of that and strengthening and solidifying our own organization, the membership piece of it. And the other thing is the training and supportive training. And that's something that I'm very focused on right now, because to me, especially in that model of an implementation circle and a coach, implementations are our focus. So really making it work for people, because just throwing a book at people is not enough. There are people who can just read a book and self-implement, which I find endlessly admirable. But many ask for a little bit of hand-holding. And we're now launching in January, we're launching what we call the Sociocracy Academy. The idea is to have a combination for people of more learning, online classes, learning from people who have more experience, having a mentor or a coach, depending on what serves you best, and communities of practice to really get those processes in and let them become second nature. Overall, the vision is to just get all the experience really into the room so that it can be shared more easily, because it's still very spread out over the whole globe, right? People who do it, people who've been teaching it, and so on. Get it all closer together so that we can exchange information and share skills more easily. The audience for that program, for the Academy, are trainers, consultants who want to add sociocracy or similar systems to their portfolio, and people who are part of implementation circles. So they have just that little bit of extra help, the coaching and the advanced learning and communities of practice, to implement in their organization.
And what is your personal mission in all of this? Like, what would you like to see in the world?
Well, I live in the US, so the first thing that comes to mind is just the divisiveness and the divide between people. That's tiring and it's sad. That is a level of disconnect. I always operate from the assumption that we're closer than we think. We just have a hard time hearing it, and that narrative needs to change. For me, that's changing. Sociocracy is part of changing society, one organization at a time. Mm. Another judgment I have, and this is really a judgment, and I'm aware of that, is that the left has shot itself in the foot for years because they have this caution around structure and anything that's crazy. Like in Sociocracy, sometimes we get the reaction from the right saying, what, sociocracy? What is that? Is that socialism? And the other side is, what, crazy? That's just another system that, puts people into boxes. Like, okay. That's so. And for some people, absence of structure, is being on the good side of things. Struggling just means that you're doing it right. And that is just not something I buy into. I think we can use systems to our advantage if we create and use systems that help us be better human beings. That's what I'm looking for. So that is my personal mission, finding systems that help me be a better human being. For me, that's nonviolent communication, and all those systems. Sociocracy really helps me relate to people the way I want to, because we can't run an organization on good intentions. That's not enough, because we will fail too often. So having a good system in place will help us perform the way we would like to perform all the time more often. That's what I'm trying to do.
Wow. Yeah, I sign up to that. That sounds great. Well, on that note, as you look out at the landscape of work at the moment, what are your thoughts? Do you feel like things are shifting? Do you feel optimistic or pessimistic about the way things are going?
Both at the same time. Both moments. I guess the only smart thing I have to say here is that I put a lot of hope in just a generational shift, because I see people. I'm 39 now. I see people younger than me going for better work conditions more than they go for higher pay, more than people in my generation and older. So that's they're really looking for a job that gives them purpose. And I hope that we get to some critical mass at some point, that's just what people expect, and that they will be honestly shocked at how workplaces are treating their people sometimes. So that we get to a point that what now is still on the fringes is going to be the new normal. Same in schools, that's why I know you're interested in education, and that's something we've talked about. If we have a way both in parenting and also in schools to show kids how they could be treated, they're not going to go out in the workforce and be treated the way people are treated so often. So I guess what I'm hoping for is that we get to that shift of second nature, new normal, that it's just the expectation.